talk a little bit about a question that came in, which is just, what do I want to get out of the tech fair? How do I use technology to win efficiency and save time? And I think it's a fantastic question because I think it highlights the main reason we're supposed to be using technology, which is to make our lives better or make our work and our output better. A lot of times it's managing the efficiency. There's so much that's asked of us in our work that finding a way to keep track of everything in a superhuman way that is asked of us is one of the main things. And that's one where you have to identify what technology implementations are going to work in your library. What is asked of you. Do you work with a consistent team of 2 or 3 other librarians that you're going to work with, the next 10 years? Do you work at a conservatory where every semester you have an influx of 15 different student workers that you have to teach how to use this technology just so that it makes your life easier and so that you're not, reteaching them things like that. So
I would add, one of the things that I say all the time when we talk about these kinds of tools, especially things around, I think one of the things that we're kind of dancing around here is the idea of automation, of doing one small thing that does a lot of steps for you in a row. And I think if you're kind of bouncing around the booth in a bit, you should definitely check out the Adobe demonstration that Michel has set up, because he's got a bunch of these kinds of things. But when I think about automation, I think the first thing that we think about is saving us time, right? We do one thing and then it does 12 other things on our behalf. But I think the other thing that happens, and I think this is especially important when you're training new folks or you've got a lot of turnover, is that it's also more consistent. Right, it's way less likely that it's way more likely that you are going to make a mistake if you're typing in a bunch of dates of every Tuesday for the next 6 months than to have a robot figure out what every Tuesday date is for the next 6 months. And so those are the things that I think about a lot. And when it comes to these kinds of automations, a lot of them are going to be very specific to you and your library. Do you have any tools in particular? I mentioned Michel because he's demonstrating a Mac application called Keyboard Maestro that he's using to do a bunch of cool stuff in Photoshop and Illustrator. But is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is just identifying, where you want to make those efficiencies. What are your biggest problems that you want to do? And I think as librarians, we do a tremendous amount of repetitive tasks that, offhand to us are very obvious. We need to circulate Boeings in a particular fashion, and when XYZ person is done, that means it has to go to the next person in that fashion, et cetera, et cetera. And that happens, for 100 or 200 works that we might do in a year. And so finding the best tool that's going to automate a process that gets it off of your mind or does it in a more efficient manner is fantastic. And then finding what the main questions you need to have answered and find the right tool for that. That's where it can be a little bit difficult. So, as a new principal librarian at a major orchestra, the first thing that I had to figure out how to do was just how to keep it all together, because it was just a significant amount more projects and works and more repetitive tasks that I had to do. And I tried everything. I tried Asana, which is like a project management type, service that's online based, that some people in the organization were using, and it was kind of clear to me that it wasn't really going to work for what I needed. And I plugged away at a number of things in the Microsoft Office suite, which are fantastic things, which I use for other things. But in terms of just nuts and bolts library stuff, what I ended up landing on for me, for my particular things, was Airtable, which I'm really happy with. But I also have to admit, it took really an inordinate amount of time to build something that worked for exactly what I needed. And so sometimes it's very nice to know what's out there, and then the other thing though is kind of really identifying what you're trying to solve so that you end up using the right software or service or something like that. So, because there's a number of fantastic vendors who are here who all provide services or software or hardware that do something really fantastic, and then it's just figuring out whether you're kind of the right market or customer for them. And that can be really the hardest thing about implementing any new technology with finite time.
I think you mentioned Airtable, and that's kind of like this big everything tool. And so I think it's a thing that a lot of different folks could use in a lot of different ways. And another thing that came up in a number of the responses was a variety of different contexts for databases. So I think one of the things, if you're not familiar with Airtable, it is a web-based platform for creating your own database, and it's a little bit intimidating, I think, when you first open it. Would you agree? Because it's super open-ended. You open it and it is a blank slate that looks maybe vaguely like an Excel spreadsheet, but it can do a lot of things that a spreadsheet can't do. Do you want to maybe talk, in your experience working with databases, what the benefits are of having a database versus just having a single kind of spreadsheet table?
Yeah. There's when we talk about databases, we have we have kind of our mainstays, which are highly specific, relational databases like OPAS and ArtsVision, things like that. And then we have things like Airtable, which is you kind of create your own database, but it's a relational database if you want it to be. And then of course you have a lot of libraries or librarians use Excel sheets, which is essentially just a non-relational database, really. So you can kind of build your own network of working with them. But the moment you want your data to really interrelate to one another, the moment you want to say, when it's a conductor on this project, that means this, and then it's pulling data from somewhere else or whatever. And that's where you might want to start experimenting with a relational database. So there's a lot of options for that, and it depends also on whether you're kind of experimenting with this just within your library, which is ultimately what I use for Airtable. It's really for just kind of not for the archiving of information, just sort of managing day-to-day repetitive tasks and automating the logic surrounding it, especially like due dates, which I don't want to sit and calculate out. It just calculates them for me, which is really, really nice, so that when I hand something to the principal base and say, I'm going to tell you it's due in a week, but I know in my head it's like, yeah, actually he's got about 3 weeks and he's probably going to use every single one of them. That's something that's very handy and automated. So it depends on whether you're doing something kind of local for just kind of your internal library management, or something more on an organizational level, which then you have to kind of make more of an argument to other people in your administration about what you need, and of course they get an input as well.
I think when it comes to technology adoption, that's a really important consideration for me because I make decisions like this sometimes for my university, not the whole university, but in my area of the university. And one of the first questions that I start with is, does it only need to make sense to me? Or does it need to make sense to another person? And how many other people? And what are their facilities with this kind of tool going to be? Or will it be overwhelming for those people? And so how many people does this thing need to make sense to? And then the other thing related to that is, how many people need to actually edit this data that I'm creating somewhere? If it can be something that I create and just send a link that is a view-only link that somebody else can use for something, but they don't get to change anything in it, that's another kind of level. And Airtable is, I think, when we compare Airtable to an Excel spreadsheet, that's, I think, another big difference. With Office 365 and Teams, Excel spreadsheets can be like a little bit collaborative and not like break too badly. But I think when we talk about these web-based things and these database platforms like Airtable, those are the sorts of things where those really shine, is being able to be edited by a number of different people and collaborative in a number of different ways. And with tools like the online database softwares that you all may be familiar with, there are kind of different degrees of authority that you can give to each. There are kind of different permissions levels that you can give to different people, which can be very useful if you're working with a large number of people with varying degrees of technical facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, rights management is like something that's really fantastic in kind of our more traditional databases which are available, and that can be really useful if you're having multiple users access data and need to read and write it in real time as well. And it's a conversation that really has to be had with your administration. I mean, we got a lot of questions from people asking about databases. how do I catalog my music? How do I manage, an ensemble in terms of events, whether it's a conservatory or something like that. And, that the tough thing about that is that, we as librarians have to come to a conference like this, learn a lot about it, and then we have to start making, some arguments back home about what we need. And sometimes it can be pretty easy for the library to be kind of left out of pretty critical moments in a discussion. And at the same time, we have to be aware of what the rest of the organization needs as well. So, at the Atlanta Symphony, we have just gone through that. We've had like 3 months of kind of exploratory meetings about systems and things like that. And the amount of people who have to be at the table and what their needs are, it's a bit of I guess a paradigm shift a little bit in terms of, the like highly technical nitty-gritty stuff that I need as a librarian. And then, identifying what other people need as well. So
one of the things that also came up in relation to these things is kind of collaborating with other stakeholders when it comes to making a purchase decision or a contract for a certain number of years to use a certain piece of software or a certain collection of hardware. What in your experience, what is a useful kind of path for that? Like, what are some of the things that you have said to administrators that have been successful?
It depends a little bit. I mean, I think past precedent is always a fantastic thing to build off of, and a lot of times you kind of have to. A lot of times the data that we might have in a database that we have, whatever that constitutes, whether it's a particularly robust OPAS database, or whether it's just kind of a series of Excel spreadsheets that were kept by multiple iterations of librarians in your organization's past. I mean, in many ways, you kind of have to start from there and identify what is going to be the easiest transition. That generally is one of the things that makes an argument toward what you need in the library or what other elements of the ensemble or organization that you're at, makes the argument a little bit easier to take, is that, hopefully it's more or less a positive continuation of a front that you're already on, rather than an entire paradigm shift or something like that. Because managing very large transitions, especially data migration, is difficult. And on top of managing it, you have to ensure that all of the data that you have isn't lost. Very often we don't get to just completely start over. Not that anybody would really want to, although a complete redo would, enable us to gain all of the tangible benefits that a new system might have. But we have to work with what we have first. So I think starting conversations from that standpoint, I think ultimately centers kind of what your avenues of success are more likely to be. Because certainly the larger of any kind of transition that you're looking into, or larger change that you're arguing for, is just going to be more difficult for every individual stakeholder, and that can cause some apprehension. So if it's not 100% out there as a positive thing that everybody can buy into, then you kind of have to slowly kind of pick your battles and win stakeholders over to a system that's going to work for everybody.